Hello, Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. In a week when the George Floyd murder was being remembered, facts are being sorted out about an incident with some similarities in Northeast Louisiana. Investigative questions also exposed key facts about construction decisions that may have led to the Hard Rock collapse. We'll look at those stories, as well as the pause on oil leases goes to court, the latest on COVID, and the recovery issues that restaurants are now facing. Also, carnival parades may be returning, but there will be new rules for certain floats. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Don Ostrom, Channel 12's Future Watch reporter, Kevin McGill, reporter, the Associated Press, that's Don, there's Kevin, and David Hammer, investigative reporter, WWL-TV, Channel 4. And everybody is here in our studio, but still sort of seated in different areas. One day we'll be around this table again. First, we're going to go on over to Kevin for the latest about COVID and restrictions being lifted, et cetera.
Yeah, alcohol is a recurring theme in this week's COVID developments. First of all, no more last call required in New Orleans bars. The 1 a.m. Limit on selling alcohol is gone under the city's latest guidelines that take effect or took effect early this morning. Second lines are permitted again in New Orleans. Parade permit applications are being accepted. There's a 90-day lag time, but that's at least a good harbinger that perhaps, if nothing bad happens, we'll have a Mardi Gras next year. Public event venues can have a 100% capacity if everyone's masked or if everyone is given proof of vaccinations. Live entertainment is coming back. All this comes as hospitalizations are way down to around 270 consistently over the last few days, under 300 for a few weeks now. That's the lowest they've been. First of all, they peaked at over 2,000 some time ago, and this is the lowest they've been since over a year ago last March, when the whole pandemic was really starting to take hold. Vaccinations in the city, at least, closed in on 60% of the eligible people vaccinated. More than half of eligible people having at least initiated the reverse that, 60% having started vaccinations, more than half completed their vaccinations. And the city's easing of restrictions follows the state's easing of restrictions earlier in the week. Governor John Bel Edwards has basically ended virtually all, with some exceptions for mask wearing, I believe, in public health and in prisons. But all of this comes, again, against the backdrop of low hospitalizations. And as the governor said, the wide availability of vaccinations. If there's a drawback to all of this, it's the fact that statewide, only about a third of the population is either fully vaccinated or has started the vaccination. And that brings us back to alcohol. The State Alcohol Tobacco Control Board has announced a statewide promotion where participating businesses are taking part in the Shots for Shots campaign. You can get a free drink, or alcoholic or otherwise, if you have proof of that you've been vaccinated within the last 7 days. So things are looking up. It's a matter of people taking advantage of vaccine availability, and of course there is the worry that there's I think another maybe the third variant that has been detected in the state. That's one worry among state officials, that if people don't get vaccinated, the variants are more contagious, can be more dangerous. But they do seem to respond to the vaccinations.
Hey, Kevin, how do the indoor rules work, like for the Superdome Saints game? If you can have a capacity of 70,000, does that mean that a certain percent of them have to be masked, or what?
They haven't really come out yet that I know of the big arenas, but it certainly sounds like, under what I've seen, the indoor and outdoor venues. I don't know that they've made a special carve out yet that addresses the sports venues, but under what they released earlier this week, it sounds like they might be able to have full capacity, but I don't know what they'll do yet, and that might be something that will be worked out with the NFL and professional teams, the NBA, as to what the vaccination or masking requirements would be, or what social distancing requirements might be in large arenas like that on that scale.
It certainly is, encouraging, but still the state is behind the national average for fully vaccinated, and as you said, just starting the vaccination process. So we need to pick it up.
Yeah, I think everyone believes that. I think that's behind that latest promotion. There's talk that other types of promotions or incentives might be offered. Again, all the news appears to be good right now. New cases are down, percentage positives are down. Hospitalizations are the key. It's
Right.
the effect on the state health system or local health systems and the capacity to provide care that's really endangered when we have an uptick in cases.
Okay, all right. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Let's go on over to David right now. And you had a report this week regarding the collapse of the Hard Rock Hotel and some construction issues.
Yeah, actually, when the Hard Rock Hotel project collapsed, it was the 18-story structure, you may recall, right down there at the corner of Rampart and Canal. When it collapsed October 12, 2019, I immediately started looking into what could have gone wrong. I had done something similar after the Deepwater Horizon explosion in the Gulf back in 2010. And that was a little bit different because there was a whole process where there were hearings and testimony on the record, on TV, in the open to see what might have happened from people who were there, and documents were released. And in this case with the Hard Rock Hotel, we didn't have anything like that. So I started developing, sources, talking to people, getting documents, and it took a long time, but over the course of more than a year, I was able to gather tens of thousands of documents that showed not only what was presented publicly to the city for the plans for the building, but also thousands of documents showing how those plans changed over time. And the thing that kept standing out was a decision to go to a lighter grade, lighter gauge of decking. And decking is the metal pans that were used as like a subfloor to pour concrete into to create those upper floors in the steel frame structure from floors 10 up to 18. And there were already findings from OSHA that the engineer, James Heaslip, had under-designed those upper floors, particularly along a cantilevered section that went out over Rampart Street. And the concern was that he hadn't put enough steel beams to support those floors. And what we ended up finding was that there was actually some emails going back and forth as long ago as January 2019, where the supplier of the decking said, hey, you need to add more supports if you're going to use a lighter gauge of decking. And as I explained in the piece, if you think about it, if you use something light like a piece of paper, if you put pressure on it, it will collapse if you don't have as many supports supporting it as if you have something a little bit heavier. And so the point was made, if you're not going to go with heavier, which is more expensive decking, then you need to have more supports. And what we found by going over it, and I went over it with a licensed engineer out of California named Michael Bradbury, the plans that continued to be used and that were actually used to build the structure showed that those additional supports were not added.
As you said, you had an engineer from California take a look at this. What are these findings? What do they lead us to? What do they show us? And what's the response from the engineer who worked on the project?
Well, the engineer hasn't said very much. That's James Heaslip. He stamped all of those drawings, and he insists that he didn't make any mistakes or any kind of under-designing, as was said by OSHA. In fact, he's challenging OSHA's findings and has hearings set in Atlanta on that, administrative hearings to challenge those findings, and he's also defending himself in a lot of civil cases in court. So what it suggests is, were there pressures, as we saw, I made the reference before to the Deepwater Horizon incident offshore, and that involved engineering failures. Were there pressures from the owners or others in the construction team to cut costs that would have led to these decisions? We don't have any proof of that at this point, but it raises those questions, and I know that there are both criminal and civil investigations going on right now that may bring some of those additional things to light.
That lighter gauge was less expensive.
Exactly. The lighter gauge is less expensive, it's easier to transport, it's easier to install, and heavier gauges and more supports from steel. Support steel is expensive, and the more of those supports that you would need to add in also would cost more money.
Did the city have a chance to take a look at these engineering designs and the changes in it?
No, in fact, as I reported back in November 2019, just a month after the incident, we found that changes were made to the decking and not reported to the city. There was a set of permit drawings that went in to get a permit that showed a heavier type of decking being used, and when the change was made to a lighter form of the decking, those did not go back into the city for a separate approval. The city confirmed that they never did get a chance to review those.
Generally, would they have a chance to review something like that? Is that sort of the process?
That is part of the process. Something that's a major change like that, the city says that they should have had a chance to review. One thing that we did find, though, is that the city does not have a licensed engineer reviewing those documents. They never have, and they are not required to have that. So then the question becomes, if they had been presented with that, would their reviewers have known enough to be able to say, hey, this is not right, or this doesn't meet the code, or this doesn't meet the requirements?
More reports on the way from you about this?
Definitely. We'll continue to follow it and continue to follow what the requirements were and what these investigations may turn up.
All right, David, thanks a lot. Over to Kevin, and there was a protest in Baton Rouge yesterday, and this is involving the death of Ronald Green a couple of years ago while he was in custody of state troopers. You were there at the protest?
Yeah, there were angry words there on the steps of the state capitol and in front of the governor's mansion, and also in an online news conference yesterday in the morning that was headed by the president of the National Urban League and the former mayor of New Orleans, Mark Morial. It's all about the death of 49-year-old Ronald Green from the Monroe area, who, as I think everyone knows now, died in May of 2019 after a police chase ended with a crash. And what came out later, and no thanks to the early reports from state police, was that he had been brutally handled during his arrest by a group of state troopers. Videos that were obtained by the Associated Press showed that he had been stunned several times with a taser. There were indications both in the video and in subsequent reports that they used pepper spray on him. He was beaten about the head. He was dragged from the car. He was dragged while face down by his ankle shackles, all while apologizing and saying that he was scared. One of the most damning aspects of the video and analysis of it by people who are experts on police tactics was he was left face down for about 9 minutes, and it makes breathing much more difficult. It's against policies in many places. There is an autopsy that we obtained that showed that among the factors in his death were very likely restraint, and they didn't. It wasn't really expounded upon, but restraint would indicate perhaps the being on the ground face down for 9 minutes. Also, an inflicted head wound, and inflicted, of course, implies this inflicted by somebody, not by the car accident. There were other injuries that could have been caused by the car accident as well. All this has been led to a great deal of criticism of state police and Governor John Bel Edwards because the video was kept under wraps for so long. Reporting on it by Jim Musty, an investigative reporter for the Associated Press, who we're all familiar with from his work back when he was with the Times-Picayune and the Advocate, kind of led to more being looked into about this. The family finally got to see the worst parts of the video last November, but it was only just within the last couple of weeks that the state police released, as far as we know, everything, but only after the AP's reporting and the AP's release of the videos.
Yeah, Kevin, I want to acknowledge, because this is, if anybody wonders why the world needs the news media, this is an example, because this was a story that would have probably never surfaced had it not been in this case for the AP. And I know you work for it, so you can't talk too much about it, but is there anything that you can say about what they were able to do to be able to get that body camera? Well,
Jim Musty just did incredible work and continues to do incredible work to obtain not only the video footage, but also other reports and information about what was going on. And it's indicative of definite problems up in the Monroe-based Troop F. 4 troopers have been, one of whom was involved in this case, have faced arrest for mistreatment of people in other incidents. And without this reporting, though, you're right, Errol. I think you wouldn't have seen the shakeup at state police that we've seen. We have Lamar Davis, an African American, is now the head of state police. He has begun making changes at the top and at Troop F. Whether it's going to be fast enough to blunt some of the criticism for Governor Edwards is the question now.
It's courageous and dedicated work by Jim Musty, and over a long period of time. I mean, it's interesting that we've gotten more attention focused on this now with the anniversary of George Floyd's death coming right around the exact same time that the additional footage was released. But he's been doing stories about this for almost a year now, if not more, right?
He has, and he's still doing work on it. I think we're going to have more coming up in the coming days to shed light of what happened to Ronald Green, and what some of the troopers and some who were involved initially did to cover it up, and the culpability that they may have in his injuries. And of course, the question is, Mark Morial was among many who yesterday were calling for the immediate arrests and termination of the troopers. The question now is that going to happen? Is it going to happen quickly? And who's going to do it? The state authorities seem to be deferring to federal authorities, which is not unusual in a case like this.
And the feds are investigating this, right?
The federal authorities are definitely investigating it, as well as state authorities. What you often see, and I think David will back me up on this, whether it's correct or not, the state usually kind of bows to the feds in something like this. Sometimes they don't bow, sometimes they elbow it out, and sometimes the feds take over when they have not done a thorough job, such as in the Danziger case. All righty.
Thanks very much. We'll see how this investigation continues. Right now we're going to go over to Don, and restaurants are getting back to business.
They are definitely getting back to business. Anecdotally, Errol was telling me he was trying to get an anniversary dinner somewhere. Errol, feel free to weigh in. And it was tricky to find somewhere that was open and available. And part of why it's tricky.
It was beyond tricky. It was non-existent. We called several restaurants, and they were just all taken up for this weekend.
It is busy times, but it's not really good times yet for restaurants. I'm going to start kind of national, go down to statewide, and end up local in New Orleans. Nationally, the Small Business Administration within the last week has shut down its restaurant revitalization fund because they have had too many applicants and they're going to run out of money. They've had more than 362,000 requests for a pool of only $75 billion, so many won't receive any funds at all, and restaurants really are still struggling. If we look across the state of Louisiana, their numbers kind of lag real time. It takes a while to get the data in, but in February, 8% of Louisiana restaurants had employment concerns, ability to hire the staffing they needed to do the business they're doing. As of April, that number went from 8% to 57% of restaurants having trouble getting the staffing they need to stay open. Sales volumes, however, are still down from what they would be if we didn't have COVID. There are a lot of people who are enjoying their first restaurant meals or their second restaurant meals who have, they've enjoyed takeout this whole time, but they haven't gone to sit at a table. 94% of the Louisiana Restaurant Association restaurants say that their staffing is below normal levels. 94%. 65% say they're below what they were pre-COVID. 34% don't think they'll be back to what normal was pre-COVID for the next 7 to 12 months. 21% of restaurants say it'll be more than a year before they're back to their pre-COVID levels, and 7% of restaurants think they will never, ever return to their pre-COVID levels, both in terms of staffing and in terms of revenue coming in. And they all are having a problem with cost, too. The cost of food is up. The cost of labor is up. So that cost is unfortunately going to get passed along to all of us. On the good news, though, if you're looking to go out to eat, the restrictions across the state have been largely reduced recently. And in Orleans Parish, where it's been probably the most strict in our whole region, it's not quite wide open, but it's pretty wide open. Indoor restaurant seating now is at 50% capacity without masks, 100% with masks or proof of vaccination or proof of a negative COVID test. Outdoor seating is 75% without masks. And the big thing that was really hard for restaurants to accommodate, the whole 6-foot distance between people and reducing table sizes within restaurants, that's gone away too. So there's more room, but there's less staff and there's more expensive food. So like Errol found, it's much harder to get a table at your favorite restaurant. You have to plan that out well ahead of time.
But, you know, in the long run, one significant difference may be having the outdoor seating, because most of the restaurants weren't allowed to have that outdoor seating now. And so in effect, the restaurants have all gotten bigger during this time. All they need now is the staff to accommodate them.
And it'll be interesting to see how the city or the parishes or whatever determine they were all allowed to take over their outside parking spaces and create that outdoor area permit-free. If they want to keep it long-term, we'll see what the different governing bodies say about whether or not they're allowed to have that outdoor dining that they never had to permit to do it this time.
Don, real quick, that relief fund, are they going to bring it back? Is more money going to get pumped into it? Or those who didn't get it are just never going to get it?
We don't know yet. Whether there will be more funding coming from Washington or not remains to be seen.
All right, Don, thanks a lot. All righty, Kevin, over to you. No, actually, we're going to Errol first, because we're talking about floats and tandem floats, some changes for those.
You know, in the early years of the Bacchus Parade, the story is one of the founders of Bacchus was flying somewhere, and it was at the airport, and the plane was out on the runway, and he was looking out the window, and he noticed these baggage carts, handlers, and how they're essentially they're trains. And he noticed, though, he studied the way that they made their turns, that the way they were organized. And he said, you know, we can do floats like this, too. And so that was actually the origin of the idea for tandem floats, because Bacchus was thinking about how can we grow. And so from that, they used that technology. So tandem floats have become an important part of Carnival, especially for the bigger crews. It's a way of adding more people, but still part of the same float unit. And so far, there's been no major problem until the past Mardi Gras, which was in 2019, where we had 2 just horrible incidents of someone who got killed. In both cases, it was someone who went in between the 2 units of a tandem float. And one was in the Knicks Parade, and one was in the Endymion Parade. And so in both cases, the city made them stop doing that and actually banned tandem floats for the rest of the carnival. There's been studies, and the most obvious solution has been, I think, what they're going to do is to develop some sort of a drape or curtain, and they've had Barry Kern working on this to have something between the 2 floats that wouldn't be obtrusive or anything else, but that would prevent somebody from coming. It's a little bit, you see something like that if you've ever seen any of the old tandem buses, where they have like this accordion sort of thing in the middle. And so that seems to be what's coming up. They're experimenting with it. The council will be voting on it soon. And that might be the answer to the whole thing.
Okay, but we can expect it for this next carnival season?
Oh yeah, I mean, if they can do it, they're not gonna let tandem floats on the streets again without some sort of precaution
modification there. Okay. All right, Ian, thanks a lot. All right, Kevin, now we go back over to you to help wrap us up here. A court case, a lawsuit regarding the pause in oil leases in the Gulf, and actually around the country too. And Louisiana's Attorney General Jeff Landry leading the way here.
That's right. There's been a hearing date of June 10th set. It's going to be in federal district court in Lafayette. Jeff Landry and Louisiana are leading about a dozen states, 13 states, I believe, who are challenging the oil and gas lease moratorium that's on new oil and gas lease sales. They're saying that, as a matter of law, the administration didn't go through the correct public comment period or other bureaucracy, and so they're seeking an immediate order to let the government go ahead with a couple of oil and gas lease sales that were canceled. But it needs to be noted that existing oil and gas leases are not canceled, and that this doesn't ban exploration or drilling or production.
So drilling continues. So the Biden administration is arguing, well, you're not really going to see, a revenue stream impact that much immediately. It would come down the line. No,
certainly not. The AP did a fact check on some of the Republican claims that Biden policies are causing currently higher gasoline prices and found them not to be have much standing. Now, again, as you said, down the line, were this moratorium to become permanent, certainly it's going to have an effect on oil and gas exploration and production someday. Again, it depends on what the administration does long term.
And so, when will this hearing be again, and what do we expect for to happen out of this hearing?
Hearing is June 10th, and it's not really clear yet whether the judge will rule from the bench on whether there will be a preliminary injunction that stops the moratorium, or whether there'll be a ruling later. We're just going to have to wait and see. It wouldn't be unusual to have a preliminary injunction fairly soon after the June 10th hearing if he decides to issue one.
Now, this doesn't just affect drilling in the Gulf.
No, it is on federal land and water. As a matter of fact, they're trying, in one objective of the suit is to get a March oil and gas lease sale that was canceled, reinstated, and it also involves another one. They directly address one on, I think it's Cook's Inlet in Alaska, so it's nationwide.
Okie doke. All right, Kev, thanks a lot. All righty, guys, time for other stories. We're going to start with E.
Not that exciting. Not that October is not going to be exciting enough with the Jazz Fest and the French Quarter Fest, but Halloween is on a Sunday, and the Saints have scheduled the Saints to play the NFL has scheduled the Saints to play at 3 p.m. on national television, and they're playing Tampa Bay.
All right.
And so if watching Tom Brady on Halloween, that's pretty scary right there.
Yes, it is.
So do your trick-or-treating early.
David?
Yeah, I did a story in January when Troy Carter was running for Congress about a property that had been long derelict that he owns in Algiers Point. He's won, and he's in Congress now, and after I did the story, they were working on the house, and now neighbors say it stopped work again, and so I'll have an update on that today.
All righty. Don, over to you.
If you are unfortunate like me and apparently drive 24 in a 20-per-hour school zone and get the tickets to prove you've driven 24, you can rest easy for a little while. Most of our schools are out for summer, so those school zones are going to go away for a little while. Still drive safely, but you can drive 24 again.
So you got a ticket for that, for 24 and a 20?
I might have gotten more than one.
Okay, we'll be aware of that. All right. Kevin, over to you.
I've gotten a few of those myself, Dawn. Coming up, I think we're going to have a watchdog group in New Orleans taking another look at conditions at the New Orleans jail and issues of attorney-client privilege and how it's hard to come by if you're a confidential call with a lawyer if you're imprisoned in New Orleans.
All righty, guys. Well, thank you very much for being here. Thank you all for joining us, too. And we will see you next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening. Thanks, guys.